For our extraordinary council meeting. God of our fathers, in whom we trust and by whose guidance and grace this nation was born. Bless these councillors of Upper Hutt and give all things needed for the faithful discharge of their responsibilities. Give to each good health and good judgment for the decisions to be made, wisdom beyond our own, and declare understanding so that we may promote thy glory and the welfare of all in the city. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Yeah. Thank you. Now, we have apologies. We have no apologies that we'll have just for the council. I think we'll be a little late. Happy to move that. Do we have a seconder? Moved by Councillor Aldous. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. It's been carried. Any changes to the declaration of interest? Can you let governance know or myself? And we have public forum. We have no speakers. And we now move to item 4, which we're here to discuss, which is local water well done. And as we lead to Council's Water Services Delivery Plan. And I'll start with you have the paper there that you've all read and think, but start with the CE, just an update.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, apologies that it's been necessary to have an extraordinary meeting and to drag you back in here yet again. But what this paper is about is council determining which options it wishes to take to the public, the consultation process on the future of local done well. Now, the reality is that we've been part of regional collaboration in terms of trying to determine what those options might look like. And it's reached the point of those councils who have remained part of that regional grouping wishing to get some form of consistency on the types of or the options that are taken out to the public for consultation. Now, just like to touch upon some concerns which are, I think they're concerns that we all share in common. The first one is really around the lack of financial information. I mean, when you're making these decisions, you're obviously wanting to think about it from a number of different perspectives, with financial being one. You know, which is the best option from a financial perspective. Affordability loops in with that financial assessment. And unfortunately, in terms of this process, what we know is that if we were to take all of the LTP data from the participating councils and aggregate that, it still doesn't align with the funding needed to meet the new legislative requirements that are going to be placed on those who provide water services. So the basis for doing some sort of financial analysis is quite problematic, and that's still very much a work in progress. And as part of that uncertainty, the analysis that so far exists is a series of fairly big picture assumptions. Because they're assumptions, there are contingencies built into them. So for us to have pulled apart what has been proposed and to have done our own analysis, we still wouldn't have anything to compare that against if you were looking at doing things on a collective basis. So unfortunately, while we would all like to understand the financial, from a benefit cost perspective, what the financials of this look like, we don't have that information in anything like a reliable form that can help you with your decisions today. Falling off that is the question of affordability. And because affordability is so interwoven with what the overall financial plan may look like for this new entity, we can't give you much of a steer on that. Which then brings you back to what can you base your decision on? And by and large, it's going to be a political one. It's what do you think at a local level, it's what do you think your community wants to see, and what would be its preference. But factoring into that political context, you also need to be thinking about things from a regional and national perspective. And it's time. And so we've been voluntarily being part of a regional collaboration. But what we know is that there is quite a strong political desire at a government level to see greater collaboration between councils to move forward in a united way. So if you decide not to go with the regional approach and come up with something different, you have different considerations than if you decide to go with it. Look, those are decisions that you must make. We can't make them for you. We can't really advise you too much on how you might make decisions. But look, others in the team here are prepared and happy to try and help answer any specific questions you may have. Thank you.
Any comments, questions? Just does the group manager have any other comments to make? No? Okay. Any comments or questions? Councillor Aldred?
I just wanted to ask about stormwater and roading infrastructure and how they interact with each other. Certainly, the roads are very much a part of stormwater. So I just wondered if anyone can go into more detail about how that could work if we were to keep stormwater or not.
Through you, Worship. The third bill in here is an explanation of stormwater network and what stormwater services are. I would say at this point they don't reconcile, so I put that out there straight away because one talks about transport services and one excludes transport services. So that I know that's not an answer, but my answer is it's complex and it's still yet to be understood. There is some more engineering terms, I suppose I would say, that describe what stormwater and what's the transport and stormwater networks intersect, but not in here. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Carson?
Thank you, Worship. Can I have an explanation of what that means? Deliver water services through an enhanced version of the status quo arrangements, i.e. Wellington Water, with changes to ensure legislative compliance, mandatory option. What does that actually mean, please?
Ruben? Mate?
The reality is it would have to be Wellington Water with the assets and debt and revenue of the water services. So Wellington Water would continue on doing what they're doing, but they would own the assets, they would own the revenue, they would own the debt.
So is it not practical to stand up a whole new organisation, which isn't Wellington Water, and then recruit the staff, etc., or have a transfer of staff from Wellington Water? I'm not happy when we just carry on with Wellington Water status quo whatsoever, because we're just going to carry on as normal, except for the changes that it's politically independent and it owns its own assets and liabilities. So what's the problem I've got is the culture within Wellington Water. We're inheriting Wellington Water as a culture, existing culture, which we know isn't very good.
Through you, Worship. I think that question's ready for me to answer, but I mean, I just would say that it's a mandatory requirement that we consult on, which is the existing provider.
Right.
So I understand. Therefore, it needs to be explicitly and really explained if we're
When it
going
goes
to
out.
consultation, because I don't buy it whatsoever. Because of that culture that's going to be inherited.
Councillor Bentley.
The CFO is certainly 100% right. What Councillor Carson might be confusing, like a better word, is that option 1 is the preferred option, which is a new regional model. Option 2 is the status quo. And that's why it's not the preferred option.
Yeah.
However, I do have a
It
question.
doesn't say that, sorry.
It does say the preferred option.
Because it says over.
Sorry, is this my time to speak or yours?
Carry on.
Thank you, Your Worship. But on that same vein, given that it says option 2, mandatory option required under legislation, according to DIA's website, our own website, with the DIA FAQs from 11th October 2024, it says, does a council need to consult on the status quo? And it says no. Why are we consulting on the status quo?
That's inconsistent with the understanding of the second act. That might be, and I'm not familiar with the website reference, but that would only be if you're not proposing any changes. You've got an entity that meets the requirements.
Councillor Bentley.
I'll read just so everyone's on the same page. No, the question is, are councils required to consult on the status quo as well as the proposed arrangement/model for delivering water services? The answer is no. Councils are only required to consult on their anticipated or proposed arrangements/model for delivering water services. However, in their consultation document, councils must identify and assess the advantages/disadvantages of at least 2 options, including the proposed arrangement/model. They are not required to consult on this information. And my question would be, is if we know the status quo doesn't work, and then there's a regional model that we are putting out as a preferred option, shouldn't the realistic second option be an in-house model, which a lot of people in the community have asked for? I personally think the other model is the way to go with the information we have, but a lot of people have asked for that in-house model.
Yes, on the in-house model, though, we've seen the figures and they don't stack up.
I agree.
Financially.
The public didn't.
Yeah, but they've seen them, haven't they? Not yet, okay. So, I mean, the issue would be that I think it's fine, it would be financially irresponsible to use that as a model because that, for us to go on alone, they just don't stack.
I agree.
For you, Worship, I think what you may be referring to is, excuse me, in the bill, so in Bill 3, rather than Bill 2, the second piece of legislation, para 36 in the paper refers to, as drafted currently, the bill would require council to go through a further consultation process if there was a future decision to transfer stormwater assets or services to a different delivery model. So there is a different consultation process required if in the future you make a different decision. It is confusing because there is 2 sets of things that are required to be done. One is the consultation you are being asked to do now, and the second is about the consultation of the future.
Any further,
That may be what
It's not.
any further comments, councillor Flowers?
I have a couple of questions, Your Worship, and I want a little bit more explanation when we're talking about moving, do we move the 3 waters into this new entity or not and hang on to stormwater? So how many traffic corridors do we have in Upper Hutt? Because there seems to be, whatever we do with stormwater, there is a responsibility of this council to still look after the traffic corridors, which is on 63. Page 11. And traffic corridors are mentioned quite a number of times in this paper. So I would like to have an understanding. So even if we go with the 3 waters, with the problem that we still have to keep the thing with the traffic corridors, how many do we have and what does that mean?
So through your worship, off the top of my head, I can't tell you what the length of the traffic corridors we have. I can certainly find out. Well, you can answer the question.
Councillor Flowers, another question.
Yes, I do. So, you know, I really feel that as a governance team around this table and this paper, and we're being asked to look at options. We've already talked about that the status quo isn't acceptable. So we're not actually consulting on the status quo, because in here, the paper said the status quo enhanced, because it also says in this paper that the status quo would not be accepted by the piece of legislation. So I think we need to be quite clear when we go out to the public and explain that to them. And I would support what Councillor Bentley has said. The community have asked for a in-house option, and whilst we as elected people around the table have been privy to some figures and facts, it would still be good to put it out there to the community so that they understand that actually we have done our due diligence, because we don't have a choice with this bill. This is almost like a fait accompli. It's a tick in the box, and it's a slap in the face for us to actually sit here and even try and debate something that when I look at page 7 under question 25, the combined legislation sets minimum requirements. I don't even know what those minimum requirements are. You know, new economic, environmental and water quality regulations. We've got all of these things under 25 that, you know, restrictions against privatisation, we know that, but we don't know actually what that looks like and what the cost would be to the community. I also think that when we give, if we give over, and this isn't a statement, there is a question here, if we were to give over the stormwater, what does that do when it comes to plan changes, right? There is going to be an impact on our ability to actually address those plan changes when it comes to, you know, the hydrology or the water, because we won't have any say over that. Because when I read this, there is, yes, we have this say if we give it over, or we're still responsible, you know, and yet we're saying let's give them all 3 waters, but we still have a responsibility around stormwater, and we take that away because we've got a big project around Pine Haven, right? And that Pine Haven comes up on page 8 under, you know, the paragraphs here talking about the relationship with Greater Wellington and the stormwater that project that we've got with Pine Haven. So where does that leave us? Are we just shifting the bill to the entity, or do we keep that? And then we talk about, you know, if we hang on to stormwater, it means that there is going to be an impact on our rate of borrowing. So we still only have the 280, but does that mean that the collective can still raise it, even if they don't have our 3 waters, to go up to 500%? Or is it a deficit less than 500% if we hang on to the stormwater? Would be a question I'd like to know.
For your worship, at a very simple answer, there was a lot in there, and there is a lot that is yet unknown. The regulations are still under development, but nevertheless, the decision asked for in that context. The answer to the last part of that question is the stormwater revenue would remain here and remain as part of this country, and it would not count towards the
Just one more last question. So where would we be if we've got 5 entities that are working at an officer level at a really collaborative stage, which is what we've been told? We also know that there's an election coming up, and we also know that there's a political perspective that is going to come into play with this. So what would happen if, say, the biggest entity, Wellington City, decided they would go it alone? Where does that leave us?
Well, I can tell you very clearly that I'm sure they won't have observers there. There'll be a commissioner there who will make a decision for them.
Yep, okay.
That's my take.
Yeah, no.
It's political. And the other about the stormwater, I mean, that will be working with the entity, much like happens now when we have to work with Greater Wellington when it comes to runoffs and things. So, I mean, but again, we aren't working on our own here in isolation. Remember, the whole country's working in this environment, and it's one of those things that we've got to work through. And the cost to the consumer at the end will be an issue, but that's an issue that the new entity is going to have to deal with. And what's affordable? Okay, any other questions? one councillor Ultra, and then we'll go to,
Chair, I just wanted to know under financial sustainability, if stormwater was kept in-house, would Greater Wellington Regional Council still be contributing to that as they currently do?
they don't contribute, they just dictate, yeah.
I don't know what they're. Greater Wellington won't be controlling water as it stands. They won't, no, the answer would be no, but I don't know.
Through you, Worship, at the moment, the primary responsibility for provision of stormwater services is funded by this council. The only variation to that is a one-off bespoke arrangement for the funding of the Pinehaven Stream Improvement Works, which Greater Wellington are contributing 50% of the cost of. And the reason for that is that due to a peculiarity, probably going back to the 1989 local government reforms, Greater Wellington kept control of the Pinehaven Stream. We're seeking, under the current arrangements, to bring that stream to a standard of service where they would then hand it over to Upper Hutt to fund the future maintenance of. So at the moment, they're maintaining that stream and they're contributing 50% of the capital cost to upgrade it. But their intention was to pull back from any involvement with it going forward. My understanding of the proposed changes to the legislation are that Greater Wellington, for the foreseeable future, will retain control of things like natural waterways. Streams are still unsure where they're going to fit and at what level their control will remain or will be taken away. But certainly things like rivers and river control works will remain under their authority.
Okay.
So that's the catchment, stay with regional.
Through you, Worship, the main river channels within a catchment will, yes. There is still a debate around streams, and obviously there would need to be some sort of definitions put in place to determine at what threshold a stream becomes a local drain or something of greater significance. But that hasn't been done yet.
Okay, one more. Yep.
We haven't heard anything from the officers around risk with regard to the risk profile for us as a council. With the options that we're putting out to the community, I would like to know, as an elected person, if I'm going to talk to the community about the options that we've got on the table, what are the risks that we have when we talk to our community and we're articulating a fait accompli that we actually have to do this, but if we don't do this?
Well, the major risk would be, I suspect, if we don't, that someone will make a decision for us.
And we need to say that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I suspect.
Which, I mean, I was just going to refer everyone to paragraphs 119 to 123, which states that if you don't do anything, it will be done to you. Is pretty much how that's written. And speed. The speed and complexity of this is a risk. Your Worship, I just want to address something. The earlier question on the DI reference the DIA website. This paper is written to what's in the law and what's in the bill. It's been legally reviewed, and section 61 of the Act, the current Act, refers that we must have an alternate option, and one of them is existing. So that is the way we've written the paper, and that is the way the region is working. So we're in line with what everyone's doing in the 5 councils, 2 options. And as I say, the paper has been legally reviewed. So we're comfortable with what is.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Bentley.
May I suggest we remove it from our website then? That's incorrect.
Okay. No other questions or comments. Then we have the recommendations before us, option A and B. Happy to move that. We have a seconder. Seconder, councillor Bentley. All those in favour say aye. The contrary, no. Been carried. Thank you. That's a good decision, team. I know it's been tough, but well done.